You should never make a human angry, because you will regret it for the rest of your short, miserable life. That's a lesson the Andorians learned the hard way when they fucked with the wrong species. Anthony Morales sat alone in a dimly lit dive bar on some no-name space station in the ass-crack of the galaxy. The grizzled vet nursed his fourth whiskey, the burn in his throat doing nothing to dull the memories branded into his brain. "Holy shit, you're Anthony Morales," a voice cut through the low din of drunken patrons and clinking glasses. "The hero of the Andorian human war." Anthony looked up and locked eyes with a bright blue Andorian sliding into the seat across from him, antennae twitching with excitement. Great. A fucking tourist. "Yeah, what about it?" Anthony grunted. "I'm Altair. Always wanted to meet you, man. The history books talk all about the crazy shit you pulled in the war, but like, what really went down? Come on, regale me with your war stories. I'm dying to know the real deal." Anthony clenched his jaw, biting back the urge to deck this prying prick in the face, but the kid's wide-eyed enthusiasm made him pause. Maybe it was time people knew the real story. The ugly, brutal truth. He threw back the rest of his drink and slammed the glass down. "All right, kid, you really want to know what happened? Humanity was minding our own damn business, just starting to spread out to the stars. Then you blue bastards showed up." The Andorian leaned forward, his smirk faltering at the human's dark tone. "Your kind, with your fancy ships and superior tech, thought you could waltz in and make us your bitches. Thought we were soft, weak, an easy target to expand your little empire." Anthony let out a harsh laugh devoid of humor. "But you fuckers didn't do your homework. Didn't read up on human history, all the wars and atrocities we survived, all the impossible odds we overcame. You made one fatal mistake. You pissed us off." He signaled the bartender, an old friend who knew to keep the drinks coming when Anthony got in a sharing mood. The Andorian gulped, antennae flat against his skull. "What did you do?" "We did what humans do best. We adapted, we innovated. We took your high-tech weapons and made them our own, and we showed you the lengths we'll go to protect our people. No price was too high, no line uncrossable when our species was on the line." Anthony locked eyes with the shaken Andorian, his stare burning with the simmering rage that had fueled him through the war. "Sit back and listen close, because when I'm done you'll understand one thing: you never fuck with humans." He began his tale as the bartender slid another whiskey his way, the liquid sloshing as the station rumbled from a distant firefight. The Andorian-human war was long over, but out here, in the lawless fringes of space, there were always new enemies to fight, and Anthony would make damn sure they all learned the same lesson. Anthony threw back another belt of whiskey, the burn fueling his words as he spoke. The eager Andorian across the table hung on every syllable. "See the blue bastards, they thought they were real smart. Figured if they cut off our supply lines, choked out our colonies, we'd just roll over. So they parked their big damn fleet right on top of our main shipyard at Titan, ready to starve us into submission." A dark chuckle rumbled up from Anthony's chest. He shook his head, a predatory glint in his eye. But they didn't count on our boys back home. The eggheads at Titan, they'd been cooking up something real special, a real pretty piece of work called the Nemesis. Pride radiated off the grizzled soldier as he described humanity's secret weapon. Now the Nemesis, she was a thing of beauty, sleek as a knife and twice as deadly. Had this cloaking tech made her damn near invisible to any sensor? And her guns? Ooh boy, punched through shields like they were tissue paper. The Andes never even saw her coming. Anthony settled back in his chair, a smirk playing across his scarred face. So picture it. Nemesis slips quiet as a ghost right past the blockade, gets a clean shot right at the heart of the Andorian command ship. Boom, one and done. He mimed an explosion with his free hand, whiskey sloshing in the other. Whole damn fleet went to shit after that. Titan launched everything they had, caught the blue bastards with their pants down. Sure, they tucked tail and ran, but not before we gave them a real bloody nose. The veteran's face darkened, eyes distant with memory. Of course it cost us. The Nemesis, most of her crew, they didn't make it back, but what they did, bought us the time we needed, showed the Andes we had some real sharp teeth. He met the Andorian's gaze, fire still smouldering in his eyes. That was the turning point, kid. The moment those blue fuckers realized just what kind of beast they'd poked, but let me tell you. Anthony leaned forward, voice low and heavy with promise. That was just the beginning of the hell we unleashed on them. Just you wait till you hear what else humanity pulled out of their bag of tricks in this war. The Andorian listened with rapt attention as Anthony continued his grim tale, the veteran's voice hardening as he recalled the next brutal phase of the war. Those blue fuckers, they realized quick that going toe-to-toe with us wasn't going to cut it, so they got dirty, started hitting where it really hurt, our civvies. Anthony's grip on his glass tightened, the rage simmering just beneath the surface. Fuckers went after our ag colonies first, torched the fields, dumped poison in the water, trying to starve us out, but that was just the beginning. He took a shuddering breath, the memories still raw. Then came Sigma-9, one of our biggest colonies, millions strong. The Andes, they unleashed some kind of bioweapon, a virus, engineered to hit us hard and fast. Anthony's eyes squeezed shut, his voice thick with grief. It tore through the colony like wildfire, people choking on their own blood, dropping in the streets. We lost millions before our docs could synthesize a cure. Millions of innocent lives snuffed out just like that. He slammed his fist on the table, making the Andorian jump. But even that wasn't the worst of it. No, those blue bastards, they had one more card to play, an all-out invasion of Earth herself. Anthony let out a harsh, humorless laugh. Guess they figured if they could take our home turf, break us at the source, we'd have no choice but to roll over. They threw everything they had at us, ground troops, orbital strikes, the works. His voice dropped to a hoarse whisper, the pain still fresh after all these years. It was hell on earth, kid. Our cities crumbling, our people dying by the millions. The screams, the stench of burning flesh, I still see it every time I close my eyes. But then, a fire ignited in Anthony's eyes, his spine straightening with fierce pride. But if those Andes thought we'd break, they had another thing coming. We dug in our heels and we fought like hell. Every man, woman and child who could hold a gun or swing a bat rose up to defend our home. A savage grin split his face. We went guerrilla on their blue asses, hit and run, strike from the shadows, picking 'em off in the streets, booby-trapping the rubble. We made 'em bleed for every inch of ground. Anthony leaned forward, his eyes boring into the Andorians. And in the end, we did it. We drove those fuckers back off our planet, out of our system. We showed 'em what happens when you try to break the human spirit. He sat back, draining the last of his whiskey. But the war, it was far from over. The Andes, they still had one last trick up their sleeve, one final play to try and bring us to our knees. Anthony signaled for another drink, his eyes haunted by the spectre of battles past. Anthony paused, taking a swig of whiskey as the bitter memories washed over him. The Andorian leaned in, eyes wide, hanging on the old soldier's every word. Those blue bastards, they thought they were real clever, sent out a distress call claiming some plague was wiping 'em out, begging for aid. Anthony sneered, contempt etched into every line of his weathered face. Our brass, they wanted to be the bigger man, end this thing without more bloodshed. So they rounded up a delegation, our best diplomats and docs, sent 'em off to negotiate a surrender and lend a hand. He let out a harsh bark of laughter, but it was a goddamn trap. The moment our people set foot on their soil, the Andes turned on 'em, ambushed 'em, took 'em hostage. Anthony's grip tightened on his glass, the rage of old flaring back to life. Those fuckers, they had the balls to demand our unconditional surrender, threatened to put a bullet in our people's heads one by one till we caved. His voice dropped to a low growl, eyes hard as flint. But if those bastards thought they could use our own compassion against us, make us betray our principles to save a handful of lives, they had another thing coming. Anthony fixed the Andorian with a stare that could melt steel. We hit back and we hit hard, launched a full-scale invasion of their homeworld, brought the full might of humanity crashing down on their goddamn heads. He described the onslaught in clipped, brutal detail. Orbital bombardments reducing cities to rubble, troops storming strongholds, guns blazing, no mercy, no quarter given. And when we found our people, our delegation, Anthony's voice cracked just for a moment, the Andes had already executed them, gunned them down in cold blood. He took a shuddering breath, the pain still raw. They thought it would break us, but all it did was steel our resolve. Leaning back in his chair, Anthony's gaze turned distant, haunted. We didn't stop, didn't falter, till every last one of those blue bastards had surrendered or eaten a bullet. When the smoke cleared, we were the last ones standing, knee-deep in the rubble of their capital. His voice dropped to a hoarse whisper. The war was finally over. We'd won, but the cost, God, the cost, the things we did, the lines we crossed. Anthony trailed off, the weight of memory hanging heavy in the air. The Andorian sat in stunned silence, the gravity of the tale sinking in. Anthony's voice trailed off into silence, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the air. Altair sat motionless, his mind reeling as he struggled to process the revelation. The true depths of the Andorians' treachery, the sheer brutality of the war's end. It was a far cry from the sanitized accounts he'd read in history books. I had no idea, Altair whispered, his voice barely audible over the low hum of the bar. The things you've told me, it's hard to believe. Anthony nodded, his expression grim. He reached for his glass, draining the last of the amber liquid in one swift motion. The truth is rarely pretty, kid. War brings out the worst in everyone, and the Andorian human war was no exception. We may have won, but the price was higher than most people realize. Anthony's eyes grew distant, his thoughts drifting back to the war's aftermath. The once mighty Andorian Empire reduced to ashes. Their cities lay in ruins, their people scattered to the far reaches of the galaxy. In the end, we didn't just defeat the Andorians, we broke them. Their society collapsed, their economy crumbled. They went from being the most powerful species in the galaxy to a shadow of their former selves, relegated to a few scattered colonies on the fringes of known space. Altair leaned forward, his eyes wide with a mix of fascination and horror. But surely after all they'd done, they deserved it. They brought it on themselves. Anthony's voice took on a bitter edge, his grip tightening on the empty glass. Some certainly thought so. There were those among us who wanted to finish what we started, to wipe the Andorians out completely. They argued that as long as a single Andorian lived, they would always be a threat to humanity. He shook his head, disgust etched into the lines of his face. But cooler heads prevailed. Our leaders, to their credit, recognized that genocide would make us no better than the Andorians. We had to be better than that, to show that even in victory we could be merciful. Anthony pushed back from the table, the screech of his chair echoing through the suddenly silent bar. He stood, his story finished, his duty done. So we let them live, but with strict conditions. They are forbidden from developing advanced technology, from expanding beyond their designated colonies, and they must pay reparations to the families of those they killed, a debt that will take generations to repay. He fixed Altair with a piercing stare, his eyes boring into the young Andorian soul. The Andorians learned the hard way what happens when you make a human angry. They paid the price for their arrogance and their cruelty, but we paid a price too, in the lives we lost and the scars we bear. Anthony's words carried the weight of a warning, a lesson hard-learned and never forgotten. Let this be a lesson to you, kid. War is never the answer, but sometimes it's the only choice we have. And when that happens, when our backs are against the wall and our survival is at stake, we humans will fight with everything we have. And may the gods help anyone who stands in our way. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.